Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thanks very much for your time. A lot of people seem surprised that an opposition candidate could, in fact, win the DRC elections. Were you as surprised?
No, I think there were good indications beforehand during the last period of the campaign that it was very likely that an opposition candidate would win. I think the main contestation or question was who would be that candidate. There was a meeting of forces between the opposition candidates at some stage, and then a breakaway again towards the end. Overall, the election was a little bit chaotic, we must admit, as far as outside observers could indicate. And there were a lot of disputes about a number of things. But in the end, I think what is important is the fact that there was a peaceful, relative peaceful, so far at least, transfer of power to an elected person. That has not happened before. And, you know, let's hope that this can hold and that democracy will survive in the end.
What, in your view, gave the opposition the edge over what was then the governing party?
My impression is that from everything that we collected in terms of information on the ground as well, and I just want to refer briefly to the fact that we visited Kinshasa towards the end of last year twice to avail ourselves of the best possible information on the situation. And from what we observed is that there were very strong views and opinions amongst Congolese against the rule of Kabila, Joseph Kabila, and that, of course, was, you know, I think found its result in the outcome of the election. So I think it was, to a large extent, more a victory for people against Kabila than necessarily for a specific candidate.
Now, then came this initiative by the opposition where they decided to rally behind one candidate. Take us through what the conversations were within and among the opposition forces, and why, in the end, Tshisekedi decided to go it alone.
What we tried to do, and that is the reason why we went to Kinshasa in the first instance in October last year, was to try and discuss with the various political parties, including the ruling party at the time, to see if we could ensure the most credible possible election and election outcome. And for that reason, we engaged with all the opposition parties. We could not succeed in doing the same with the ruling party, but nevertheless, we at that stage found that there were at least 7 different opposition candidates. At their request, we invited them to South Africa. All the parties, all the opposition parties came, and we inspired them to have a conversation amongst themselves towards the idea of one single candidate. After this, they went to Geneva for another round of opposition talks, and it was there that they then decided to bring forward the name of Martin Fayulu as the single opposition candidate. When Felix Tshisekedi came back to the DRC afterwards, it was a few days later decided that he should not follow suit, and he went on his own with the support of 1 or 2 other opposition parties, opposition leaders, and you know, in the end it ended up with a race between mainly 3 candidates. The one was the ruling party candidate, Shadari. The second was Tshisekedi, and the third one was Fayulu. According to reports from many sources in the Congo, Fayulu was the preferred candidate of the voters in an anti-campaign or a campaign against the Kabila. But you know, the finding of the Electoral Commission was that Tshisekedi was the winner, and I think observers were not necessarily agreeing with that, but there was no proof or sufficient proof to point out that it was actually not the correct ruling or judgment by the Electoral Commission. And so the Constitutional Court over the weekend confirmed the ruling of the Electoral Commission, and that is why Tshisekedi was installed or sworn in as the new president today. What lies ahead, I think, is important, and we will have to observe the situation from the outside and everywhere inside the country to make sure that the transfer of power, the transition, is actually as smooth as possible, that there are no new outbreaks of violence. And wherever there are signs of that, I think it's important that South Africa also play its role in ensuring that there comes about the most possible inclusive government to address the needs of the people of the Congo.
But just for the sake of clarity here, what, as far as you know, Mr. Mayor, were the terms of engagement among the opposition parties? In other words, I mean, was Tshisekedi necessarily wrong, or did he go against any set of rules by deciding to go it alone?
Well, when we engage with them, we try to lead them into accepting a set of criteria that a single candidate should be judged on or decided upon by the opposition parties and the opposition leaders. They agreed on such criteria when we met with them here in Pretoria. And when they went off to Geneva, it was still our impression that that was the basis on which they would make the selection. And they made that selection according to those rules that they set themselves. I think the decision of Tshisekedi was an individualist approach. It was a breakaway, probably under pressure of his own support base. We must remember that Tshisekedi's father was, for a very long time, a very well-known opposition figure. Many people would say that he was actually the winner before, that is Etienne Tshisekedi. He passed since the previous election, and in a certain way, Felix Tshisekedi carried the banner of the Tshisekedi family, the legacy of his father, and I think it was a matter of him being under pressure by his own party, his own followers, that led him to break away from the rest after the Geneva decision by all the opposition leaders. So. But we were not present during that decision, and we can't really speak about what transpired there. All that we know is that he decided to go it alone or break away from the rest of the opposition. And there are various rumors about how that happened and what kind of deals were made. It's difficult to judge it from the outside. What we have in front of us is a decision that was made by the Constitutional Court based on the outcome that was given, or the result that was given by the Electoral Commission.
We've run out of time, but I have to ask you this. There was a time after the voting when the AU, on the one hand, called for the final results to be delayed. And on the other hand, you had the regional bloc, SADC, already congratulating Tshisekedi, which suggested that Africa was not speaking with one voice and therefore was divided on this matter. Add to that the fact that you had the publications like the Financial Mail, the Financial Times, saying they had a result that showed that Fayulu had in fact won, and other people suggesting that that was as a direct result of influences from France, for example, which wanted a particular result. And what pundits are saying is that this shows that these outside influences still have an interest in the DRC and are backing the various or different factions, and that doesn't bode well for the future of the DRC, because these people will continue to want to influence the direction that the DRC is going to take, and these forces remain powerful and they will be pulling in all sorts of different directions.
I think you're absolutely right in pointing out, the developments since last week about the result and so on. I think the finding of outside institutions were based on the claim by Senko, that was the Catholic organization that observed the elections. They had no less than 40,000 observers deployed around the country at the time of the elections at the end of December. And their finding was that Fayulu was actually the winner by no less than 60%. You know, I saw those numbers myself as well, but it's difficult to vouch whether that is correct or whether the Electoral Commission is correct in terms of the numbers that were put on the table. On the one side, we had the AU in terms of its statement by the end of last week saying that they will send actually the chairman of the AU Commission as well as the AU chairperson to Kinshasa to go and negotiate about the outcome of the elections. On the other side, the Constitutional Court then made the ruling and said they confirmed the outcome of the elections by means of what the Electoral Commission found. And that finding by the Constitutional Court was then supported by SADC, including South Africa. So there was a little bit of difference of opinion, obviously, about this between the different institutions on the continent. That was then followed by a statement by the AU to say they will not continue with their visit to Kinshasa, and they will pronounce further on this next month when there's another AU summit. So I think, you know, there's still a lot of uncertainty about different findings as far as the election result is concerned. The basic point I think what we are all observing and looking at the moment is whether there will be a peaceful transfer of power now to Tshisekedi. And I think South Africa in this regard has to play a very important role. My hope would be that South Africa will actually deploy a special envoy, if it's not already done, to look at the situation, to play its role and to influence the situation in the best possible way to make this a peaceful transfer of power. If not, then we can see trouble arising in terms of new protests, possible violence and so on, and that will not be good for the country and not be good for the surrounding and the neighboring countries. So DRC is a very important country as far as Southern Africa is concerned, both in terms of size, in terms of people, and in terms of resources. And South Africa has a very specific interest in ensuring that there is peace and stability. We also have a major deployment of South African soldiers as far as the peacekeeping force is concerned in the DRC today. And that is another reason why we have to keep a very close eye on developments there and try to keep the situation as stable as possible. My understanding is that the South African government is fully aware of the situation and that our president is also in direct contact with the situation to the extent that most likely we will keep a very prominent position as far as keeping the situation stable.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your time and insights this evening. He is, of course, the director of In Transformation Initiative, following, of course, the inauguration today of Felix Tshisekedi.